The early signing period is here, and we are going through conference by conference here on HoopSeen.com. Look at the best players coming into your conference today. We're going to talk about the Big Ten, certainly a conference no stranger of talent, no stranger of great coaches, no stranger of great recruiters. And this year's class, I think we've got some studs at the top. A lot to go through. Josh, you did a really good job with your conference overview here on HoopSeen.com. Let's start with the big thing right out of the top. Let's start with the classes, actually. Let's look at the in totality. Michigan State sits on top of our class rankings for the Big Ten, and one of the reasons why is Xavier Booker. But from there, talk about the balance and why are they such an easy pick for not only be a top 10 team, nationally, but also to lead the charge here in the Big Ten as well.
Yeah, so like you said, Xavier Booker is, the top of the class, but they have depth at every position with this one, and I love that because it's you're going out there and you're recruiting for your needs. You're not just going out there and grabbing the best available. They got they got the forward in Xavier Booker, they got the wing in Cohen Carr, they got the two guards in Garrick Normand and Jeremy Fears. So yeah, I think Tom Izzo and staff did a great job kind of filling out this class, and it's their deepest since 2016. We've talked about this, and it kind of reminds me of that class because that class also had positional depth.
Yeah, they check all the boxes, right, with this class. And I think that's the sign of a really good class. Let's keep this going a little bit with Michigan State and the Spartans. So when I watched Xavier Booker, at one point I thought he was the number one player in the country, right? And I thought really highly of him. We saw him at the Grassroots Showcase. We saw him a lot, on our platform that we partner with NYLA. And there was no confusion whatsoever on his upside, right? And his long-term trajectory. Right. Now there were some ups and downs, and there's other guys in the class that I think that kind of rose up. But the more I watched Xavier Booker, the more he reminded me of Al-Farouq Aminu. And at the same time in Al-Farouq Aminu's career, Al-Farouq, Chiefs had an unbelievable career. He's, playing now for over 10 years, made a great living for himself, been a really good role player at the NBA level. But I would never say he was the alpha on any team that he's been on. But he's made a really good career, for himself after a really good, career at Wake Forest. Was a top 10 guy, also just like Xavier Booker. But the concerns I think were really similar there with Aminu as what we have with Booker. Are we consistent? Is the fire always going to burn? The versatility is undeniable, right? Undeniable. Yeah. There's plenty to work with. And I think if you rewind it back and you go look at Aminu's career at Wake Forest, I think if you get that type of career out of Xavier Booker when he's there in East Lansing, you got to be pretty happy.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's why he's the top pro prospect coming into the Big Ten in this class, and it's because of that versatility. And, I love that comparison because I can see that, when you brought that up to me at Best of the South, I was like, oh, yeah, duh. Like, that's a perfect classic JY comparison.
I appreciate that. I love Jeremy Fears too, for the record. We always know that the Tom Izzo and point guard relationship, I think when you look back on the storied career of Tom Izzo, you always know that he's got a point guard that really is an extension of who he is. Jeremy Fears, to me, I think is really an important commitment, especially I think when we've kind of done this exhaustive search across the country on all the classes, Josh. Jeremy Fears, the more I look at him and the more I look at his fit with Michigan State, the more I think that's actually one of the best point guard fits overall in the entire country.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, at this level that he's at right now on, high school, EYBL, whatever, he's a triple-double machine. Like, the guy goes out there and just produces. In the Big Ten, it's a big guys league, so I don't think he's going to be putting up double-digit rebounds. But when it comes to points and assists, absolutely. Like, I think he could develop into that, that Cassius Winston kind of guard that we associate Tom Izzo with, that he wins with. Like, it just produces consistently.
Yeah, I mean, he's done it every level he's been at. He's done it at USA basketball. He's done travel basketball. He's done it at high level high school teams. So yeah, Jeremy Fears is the guy that I think will only get better with Tom Izzo leading the charge. We've obviously talked more about him. There's other pods or other segments that we've talked about Michigan State. So I want to move on past them a little bit and look at Ohio State. They're our number 2 overall class in the Big Ten as we start the early signing period. Again, we talked about with Michigan State like a check all the boxes for needs. I think Ohio State did the same thing with their class, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got the big man in Austin Parks. You got a classic Chris Holtman, Ohio State forward, and Devin Royal. And you got 2 really good guards there. And what I love about this is it's building upon the recruiting success they've had in the past. Like, I don't think that they've had, like those blow away 5-star one and done prospects. But what they're doing is they're stockpiling classes on top of each other and building a sustainable winner.
That's so funny you said that. I was just thinking that same thing about Bruce Thornton, and how does
Yeah,
Bruce, tie himself in with this group? And I thought, man, you put Bruce Thornton and Tyson Chapman together, that's a dynamic group because Bruce is so good. It actually is going to remind me a lot of when he and Kaden Carlisle were together at Milton High School.
for sure.
Power drive to the rim, kick out to the wing, knock down the shot. Like Chapman to me is one of the best shooters in the class. I said this on another segment that we've done before. I actually think he's one of the sneaky pro prospects that we have in the class because of his shooting ability, because of his size. And I'm with you too. And I think we tie it all together with these great classes that continue to stack on top of themselves. Scotty Middleton on his own becomes really more, quite effective because he's an elite slasher. You're right. Devin Royal, tremendous Big Ten player, tremendous Chris Holtman type of player. So there is some value, and maybe we need to think about that more often when we rank classes, on the value on stacking classes with the class that came before them. I think that's a really good point that you bring up. I really like that a lot. Is there another class that you really like in the Big Ten that also kind of comes to mind?
Yeah, so one that comes to mind is Maryland. And why I like Maryland is because that new staff over there, with Kevin Willard and all them, they've prioritized locking up the DMV with these guys. They got 3 guys from the Virginia, Maryland, DC area. And that to me says that they're, taking that seriously, that there's a ton of basketball talent there, right? You and I have had the discussion of, that's one of our favorite areas for players.
My favorite by far.
Yeah, and so like if you're a school there, if you're Georgetown, if you're Maryland, if you're whoever, you got to prioritize that area. And this Maryland class shows me that Kevin Willard and company are taking that seriously.
I don't know if we've had. Well, I don't know. We could have. I mean, Turgeon did a pretty good job, brought some pretty good players in. Yeah. But I don't know if there's quite an excitement, to your point, about getting the DMV guys to stay home like we saw since Gary Williams was there. And Gary Williams is, obviously one of the most, storied coaches in school history, one of the most beloved coaches in school history. When I first got started, I loved watching his teams play. Juan Dixon's one of my all-time favorite college players. Obviously, Steve Blake was there. I think we may see a return to that with that type of we talked about that with Ohio State. How do you keep stacking good classes together? It'll be interesting to see how this class connects to the following class behind them with the talent they have there in the DMV. Side note, give me like your three like most favorite basketball markets for high school basketball. DMV obviously is in that 3.
DMV is up there. Obviously, we gotta give love to Atlanta. We're here, and like I'm busy all winter because there's talent here. There's so much talent here. And then man, that third one's really tough because there's so many great ones. Like I love Florida. I love going down to Florida. Texas obviously is great.
Well, that's a whole state. That's different.
I know. Okay. How about Philly? The Philly area always produces tough players. And I really love that kind of Northeast gritty style player. And I think of Philadelphia first when I think of that.
I know. I'm thinking, are there any Philadelphia guys coming into the Big Ten? I'm looking at our list here. I don't think that there are. That's okay.
Yeah,
but that's the Big Ten.
In the Big East, right?
Yeah, I know. We probably should say that for a different pod, but nevertheless, I like where your head's at with that. I do like where your head's at with that. Let's talk about Iowa for a second. Like when you talk about Philly, you think about a certain type of guard that comes out of that city. Now, when you think about Iowa, you think about certain types of players that they have. What do you like about this group that they're bringing in to Iowa City?
I mean, you kind of said it, right? Like when you think of Iowa, you think of a certain type of player, and then with Brock Harding and Owen Freeman, 2 mid-pro academy guys. These are Iowa players. Like when you see them wearing those Hawkeyes and the Hawkeye logo in warmups, that's like, oh yeah, of course you're going to Iowa. You fit perfectly. Owen Freeman is the typical Iowa kind of big that we're used to. He's gonna be a 4-year guy that develops into an all-league guy eventually. And then Brock Harding, he kind of reminds me of Jordan Bohannon in the sense he plays with that same kind of swag. He has that, ability to break you down and make high-level passes. And then he can just light you up from three-point range, too. I think he's just going to be a huge fan favorite in Iowa City when he gets there.
Yeah, we have him ranked higher than anybody in the industry at 113 overall in this class of 2023, really high. But we've seen him go head-to-head with other guys. We actually have higher than him in the rankings. And certainly saw some good things from Brock Harding. He was tremendous. I mean, he was tremendous in the month of July.
Oh, yeah. Like, at Best of the South, man, I couldn't stop talking about him.
What's that?
At Best of the South, I couldn't stop talking about him. Like, if you were within earshot, you probably heard me. Like I was probably tapping you on the shoulder, being like, look at this guy. Because he was that good at Best of the South.
He was absolutely dominant in the month of July, and I think with a lot of people, paying attention to the shoe stuff, which I totally understand, totally justifiable. But Brock Harding, make no mistake about it, was incredible in the month of July. Outside of the top 100 rankings, is there a guy that maybe on the periphery that has a chance to continue to blow up once he gets to college in the Big Ten?
Well, Brock Harding would have been my obvious choice here, but then
Sure.
I have to go through and look through it. Owen Freeman, Brock Harding are two guys that I would have thought of. If there's anybody that comes to your mind, let me look through my list real quick, and feel free to jump in.
Yeah, I probably jumped the gun there. He's just inside the top 100. Kerry Booth to Penn State, I think, was a really important commitment for those
That's
guys.
a really good one. I was going to go there, but I didn't know where he was at in our rankings.
We have him at 92, which is lower comparative to the rest of the country. Certainly a high ceiling guy. Is that Calvin Booth, obviously the general manager for the Denver Nuggets, played at Penn State. We're seeing Penn State really kind of turn things up. Obviously, a good friend of mine, Brian Snow, is the director of recruiting there. So I think that he's certainly connecting the coaching staff with some good players to go after and recruit. But, as far as upside goes, there's a lot of upside guys, I think, in the Big Ten this year. And I think Booth is one of those players that, by the time he's 20, 21 years old, if he stays that long in college, which I imagine he probably would, we could be talking about a really impressive guy once he gets on there and see what Shrewsbury does a good job of taking that pro level development and seeing how that really pays off with a guy like Calvin Booth or Kerry Booth, excuse me.
Yeah, for sure. I got my guy now. I had to scroll through my list, and Gus Yalden. We have him outside of the top.
Gus Bus.
And the Gus Bus that's a Wisconsin guy if I've ever seen one. He's the perfect big for that system because he's skilled and he plays physically around the rim, but he can also pass, shoot, and dribble. And when you think of the guys who have led Wisconsin to their success, it's guys who can do that, pass, shoot, and dribble, right? Frank the Tank, and then you had Ethan Happ, and I think Gus Yalden can fit into that kind of role eventually.
Really good passer too. The thing with Gus, like, he's played everywhere. I mean, literally, I actually don't even know where he's from because he's played on so many different schools, so many different travel teams. But I think people kind of knock that and whatever. I mean, it doesn't bother me that much. But I think when you do that, you do learn different styles of play along the way.
Yeah.
And you kind of pick things up, and it'd be interesting to see like what really sticks with him and like how can he turn that up. And one for me that I'm excited to watch is we talked about Jackson Kohler with Michigan State, talking about classes that stick together. Pardon me. I'm curious to see Jackson Kohler play Gus Yalden. That'd be a matchup I'd actually really like to watch.
Oh yeah, that's a Big Ten battle right there.
Yeah, no doubt about it. It looks like young JY like all over again. That's what it really looks like. We talk about this all the time about programs on the come up, and I got to talk about Minnesota for a second. Like, I think what they're doing, it's hard to ignore. I mean, anytime, we talked about, Xavier Booker being a pro candidate, but, Dennis Evans isn't that far off. 7'1", probably the most premier shot blocker we have in high school hoops coming in. Every time you see him, he gets, progressing a little bit better. I'm not calling him Taco Fall, but I saw a clip of Taco Fall in China the other day on social media. And I think it says something like, all of a sudden Taco Fall is like young Wilt Chamberlain playing in Shanghai or wherever he's playing. And the film was incredible. Like, we saw Taco play all the time in our stuff with each one teach one. And I'm like, holy crap, is this the same guy? And Dennis Evans, every time I see him play, I'm like, man, this dude gets better and better and better. And so, I'm curious to see how he develops there at Minnesota. I really like that coaching staff a lot. I think they've got a really special class with him and Cameron Christie. It's Max Christie's little brother. Max, it's funny. I was watching the Lakers the other day. I was like, who is that on the Lakers bench? It was his brother, played at Michigan State. So Max Christie in the NBA. Cameron Christie also is a guy that I think long-term could be an upside guy. But those two guys together is, to me, why I think Minnesota's got the third best class overall in the Big Ten. And I know if you're an Illinois fan, you're probably, screw you, Young. You know what you're talking about, which is not the first time I've heard that from Illinois fans in my career. So I come to expect that. But Dennis Evans is a difference maker. I think he's a guy that could block 5-6 shots a game right out of the gate. I know you haven't seen him in person, but have you ever watched any film of him?
Yeah, I've done plenty of my film reviews on all these guys, and yeah, the Big Ten has a reputation for producing great bigs for a reason. It's because of they recruit guys like Dennis Evans.
I love it. I think he's got a chance to be really good. Him against Kerry Booth will be a matchup that I'm excited to watch as well. Let's keep it going here. Let's talk about Illinois for a second. Dre Gibbs Lawhorn is a player that certainly has a lot of he's been playing it out at Montverde. He's played at Real Salt Lake, and he's kind of been all over the place. Was a Purdue commitment at one time, so that'd be interesting to watch that game play out with Illinois and Purdue. But for Illinois, I still feel like they're going to get a player that's going to be an absolute difference maker as well. And Illinois always is one of those programs I just feel like they're always on the cusp of landing somebody. They're like, oh my gosh, that's where he's going. But Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn, if he's your top guy right now, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I love Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. I think he's an elite scorer. Whenever I've seen him, he just filled it up. Whether at camps here in Georgia or on the UYBL circuit or with Montverde, I've just seen him kind of light it up everywhere he goes.
How can you not also have a great program in Illinois, right? I mean, you got the Chicago area, you got the Midwest. I think they're the pick of the litter. I'm interested to see, like, we've seen this real pivot. Ohio State has always kind of been there. But then you got Minnesota getting in there, landing guys from California, bringing them in, and now you look at Maryland coming into the league, kind of like this resurgence. So for years it was Indiana and Illinois. You knew like they're always called the Eric Gordon era, right? Like Eric Gordon committed to both schools, obviously ended up going to Indiana, but like those are the programs that always kind of led the charge always on getting the top guys. And so I'm interested to see over the next couple of years, do we see that? Do you think Indiana's got that opportunity to do that with Mike Woodson there?
Yeah, absolutely. We've seen Indiana kind of go out of their general recruiting space recently too. They've prioritized Georgia. I see that, the 80 stripes around the Atlanta area all the time.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah, they're around they're all like their recruiting staff is all over the place down here. That shows when you get a guy like Ja'Kai Newton coming there, you got Caleb Banks coming there. Pretty much any top prospect from the Atlanta area, they've got they've at least got offers to.
Best pregame warm-up gear in college basketball?
Dude, I absolutely love it. I lived in Indiana for a little while, and I just love seeing that. It's just so that's so unique and so college basketball, right? That's iconic.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of another one that would match that, but yeah, it's hard to get past that for sure. Michigan, no stranger recruiting high-level players over the years since Juwan Howard's been there. This year is a little quieter. Yeah, I mean, they've got some guys. Just got George Washington III, who was a Louisville commitment at one point. They got Papa Conte, two guys, pretty good players. But for Michigan, there was a stretch where they just landed 5-star after 5-star after 5-star. This class is more of a sustainable group. Is that a fair way to articulate it?
Yeah, and actually, not to correct you, but George Washington III, this makes it even more interesting. He was an Ohio State commitment.
Ohio State, sorry.
Yeah, he lived in Louisville. So that's where the connection is. But he decommitted from Ohio State and went to their rival in Michigan. So that's going to make that game extra spicy when that comes around. And yeah, I do think there is this sustainability here. George Washington III is a really great shooter, really great guard, and Papa Conte is going to be that rim protector that we've been saying it a ton. That Big Ten big, where he's going to protect the rim and grab all the rebounds.
I love it. Let's wrap things up. Everyone loves a good shooter. A shooter, as we know in the Big Ten, especially, can absolutely ruin your entire season. Is there a shooter coming into the league this year that you got to, that already is giving some guys some heartburn?
Oh yeah. Rutgers has one in Gavin Griffiths. I love this guy. 6'7" wing. He's going to be able to light it up in the rack. I know it's called Jersey Mike's now, but for college basketball diehards, it's always going to be called the rack. And I think Gavin Griffiths is going to have that place bumping.
Jersey Mike's. I got to rank that one pretty high on my deli shops, by the way.
Yeah. Okay. I like that.
Yeah, that's not your genre, but man, I can get down on some Jersey Mike's probably more than a lot of other places.
Hey, I can appreciate that. Maybe that should be a ranking for the HoopSeen website at some point.
Oh, that would be the most viewed thing that we've ever done. So, well, hopefully you've made it through the end of this Big Ten. Make sure you check out Josh's story right down below. We were going to embed this story, this video right on the story on HoopSeen.com. Let us know. Hit us up on Twitter. Let us know if we got something right, we got something wrong. Illinois fans, feel free to send me death threats like you always do. There's a long history there with me and Illinois fans dating back to my days at another company. But certainly love these classes and definitely looking at Michigan State right now as the top 10 or the number 1 team in the Big Ten for the National Signing Day. Josh, that was fun. Let's do it some more.
Let's do it.